I came to USD for two reasons. First, I was a debater in high school, and between my junior and senior year, I came down to USD for a summer debate clinic. And the person who ran that, Professor Dick Lott, invited me to come back to USD as a freshman and said he would put me on the varsity debate team. So I was anxious to do that. And in addition to that, I went to a Catholic high school in the LA area, Bishop Aumont, and a number of the students there who were ahead of me had attended USD, and they encouraged me to come here. And obviously, once I came down here, I fell in love with both the city of San Diego and with the beautiful campus here. And so it was kind of a no-brainer. The values that one obtained while coming to school here, the commitment to community, to your faith, to your family, are virtues and values that you carry with you throughout your entire life. And fortunately, I live here in San Diego, and I probably pass by the school every day, and I look up on the hill, and those are the things that you think about. And those are the things that guide your life, and something that you will take to your grave. My time on campus between 1969 and 1973 when I graduated, of course I went on to law school, but I'm focusing more on the undergraduate time, was of course bracketed by Woodstock, by the Vietnam War, the shooting at Kent State, where students were gunned down at Kent State, occurred while we were on campus. And then as we were leaving, we had the Watergate scandal. So there was a lot of upheaval. There was a lot of distrust of the institutions of government. And so there was a lot of questions that were raised about the values that had steered our country, that guided our communities, and that our professors were trying to imbue in us. And all of those things, I think, contributed to the questioning, but also to the desire to obtain answers, that the quest that we were on while we were here on campus. Well, the social life here was very vibrant. I was in a fraternity. I was a teak while I was here. And, but there were a lot of peculiarities about being a student at USD in terms of social life. For example, if you dated a resident woman who was at Founders or Camino Hall, you had to report to the portree, and she was called and summoned down, and that was something that took a little bit getting used to. Of course, we had no parietal visitation in those days. The men were not allowed in the women's dorms, nor were the women allowed in the men's dorms. And so things were pretty regimented, and it took some getting used to that. But that aside, there was a great camaraderie, not only among the men, for example, but between the students of both genders. And we dined together, we had assemblies together, we took classes together, and you know, in very many ways, and I'm sure others have said this, but we were like a big family of children, but a family nonetheless. And it was just a wonderful place, mainly because of the relatively small size of the school. You virtually knew everybody on campus, particularly the residents, and whether they were in your fraternity or another fraternity or clubs that you were in, we really knew each other, and we grew up together. I think the biggest challenges was the time that you had to try and do all of the things that you wanted to do. I wanted to go to law school, and so I knew I had to maintain a certain grade point average. I was very interested in student government. I was sophomore class president, and I had the number 3 position on the student government when I was a junior in school. I was very active in my fraternity, and so the biggest challenge, and then I had to work also because I did not come from a very well-off family. And so I was working all during school and doing those other activities. And so the biggest challenge was balancing all of those activities with the time that was available. And again, that was something that was very valuable in terms of a life lesson in leading the rest of my life after I left school. One of the experiences I had here that I will for always carry with me and that I think about a lot when I think about USD occurred when I was a first-year student. And we used to have these forums right after lunch in the quad over between Founders and Camino Hall. And it was an open forum. Anyone could get up and speak. And in those days, it was usually about political matters and about the war in Vietnam and about the government and those types of things. And I was a little conservative in those days. But I was also an experienced public speaker, having been a debater all through high school and into college. And I also thought a lot of myself. So I had no compunction to get up in front of this large crowd and express my views. So I did that. And that evening, I was living in the dorms across the street on Goshen Street. And there was a knock at the door, and one of my roommates answered the door and came and said, "There's a group of guys here to see you." And I thought, wow, what could that be about? So I go to the door, and the lead of this posse was a guy named John Murphy, who was about a year ahead of me. And John was at the time and remains to this day a large gentleman. And he had long hair in those days, as a lot of the students did. And he said to me, he goes, "What you had to say at the forum this afternoon, we don't agree with." But he goes, "I got to hand you one thing. You had a lot of guts to stand up and say it." And John and I are very good friends to this very day. He also went to law school here, and we serve on the Board of Visitors together. But that challenge, in a sense, but also the acceptance of other points of view, is one of the things that I remember most about USD. I also remember the fear that ran through me when I first started this conversation. I've had a boring life in the sense that I wanted to be an attorney since I was 5 years old. And my parents wanted myself and my sister, who was a year younger, to both be lawyers. And by God's grace, we both fulfilled that ambition that our parents had for us. So my whole grammar school and high school and college was directed towards being an attorney. And I was lucky enough to achieve that goal, and I was accepted to USD Law School and completed that course of studies, and I'm now in my 38th years of practice. So I always wanted to be a lawyer, and I was able to do that, in large part thanks to this institution. Without question, the person at USD who had the biggest impact on me was Sister Sally Fury. I cannot express the admiration that I have for her. She's a towering intellect. She has unbelievable energy, wisdom, and she is one of my true life heroes. And again, when I think about this place, I think of her, I think of Art Hughes. But again, the person that was most influential on me, particularly in those years at school, and I was blessed to be able to work with her as Secretary of Academics on designing the long-range plan for the school and on putting together an American Studies major. But no one stands out like Sister Fury does. My favorite place on campus is almost where we are now. In those days, there were no buildings on the south side of Marion Way once you got past the Chancery office, which is now the Hughes Center. And there was the Rose Garden, which the sisters had put in. And then at the end of the Rose Garden, which was somewhat adjacent to Camino Hall, there was what we called the Point. And in those days, the Point had just scrub on it. And we would go out to the Point, usually when the sun was going down, to see one of the most beautiful sunsets one could imagine over Mission Bay and the ocean. It's where you would go to kiss your girlfriend. It was where you would go to dream about what your future was like. And so I'd have to say that the Point was my favorite place on the campus. I think one of the most intriguing events was when Ralph Nader came to campus and spoke to the students. He was very well known even then as an environmentalist and a consumer advocate. And of course, he was an attorney. And so for me, to be exposed to someone of that renown, someone that was that much on the cutting edge of political and social issues in the country, that was a very exciting thing, and it was very inspiring, and I remember that to this day. Well, I graduated from the law school here in 1976, and I took the bar exam in the end of July of 1976. And 2 weeks later, I started with the California Attorney General's office. And I stayed with that office for 35 years. I served for about 10 years in what was called the Special Prosecutions Unit in the office. And in that unit, I was charged with investigating and prosecuting organized crime. I prosecuted members of the mafia, members of large drug cartels that were infiltrating from Florida to California in those days. And then after that assignment was completed, I was put in charge of the San Diego office. So I had about 75 attorneys that worked for me. And one of the large responsibilities of the Attorney General's Office Criminal Division is to carry out the death penalty in California. And although the views differ on the death penalty as a matter of professional accomplishment, I'm proud to say that my office accomplished the first execution in California in 1992 and completed 4 other cases. We had more executions in my office, in a sense, the cases that we had, than any other office in the state. And what that represented is not a cold-bloodedness, it was just professionalism in carrying out the duties that we had as prosecutors for the state of California. I retired from the Attorney General's office after 35 years. I was retired for 48 hours, and then I started in the San Diego District Attorney's Office, where I currently work. And there I'm a senior advisor for law and policy. I help the district attorney and her executive staff in carrying out developments in the law, either statutory or by case decisions. I consult with them on major cases and outcomes that we hope to obtain in those cases. And I'm able to work with all the prosecutors in the office on their important and complex cases to assist them and give them the benefit of my experience as being a prosecutor for 3.5 decades. I think what I would tell someone who's starting in law school today is to spend the first year at least really working on the basics of learning how to think like a lawyer. And once that threshold is met, the law student needs to think about what aspect of the law he or she wants to pursue. Because in order to obtain a position, for example, in a prosecutor's office, you have to bring some amount of experience during law school to that kind of a practice. And the same is true in civil litigation or antitrust or intellectual property. So after the first year, the student has to begin to sort out what type of practice they want to pursue as an attorney and begin to find internships and experience in those areas of practice and carry those out, learn their trade, learn how to really practice law in the area that they are interested in, and then go from there in terms of passing the bar and obtaining a position. One of the traditions, and it sounds corny today, but were the sock hops. I don't know if we called it that in college. I think we did. I know we did in high school. And here, they used to be up in the gym, well, it's still the gym, I guess. And they would have fabulous bands. And we'd all go up there and you'd take your shoes off and dance in your socks. And I guess part of it was fun because it was something you had done in high school and you were still able to carry on here at college. But that was just some special thing that I thought was really a fun aspect of the social life here. I'm a member of a group called the Super Diners for the Union Tribune, and we provide thoughts on restaurants and food trends and that type of thing. And I was asked to do that because I know a number of restaurant owners and chefs in town, and a couple of them nominated me for that. And so that's a lot of fun. Reflecting back on USD, my favorite place to eat on campus was the cafeteria for the seminarians. When I was a second-year student, my roommate and I washed the dishes in that cafeteria every night. And the seminarians got the best food on campus. They had their own chefs, and they got steak twice a week. And because we worked there washing dishes, we got to eat their dinners. So that was a real benefit of working there. And so that was my favorite place to eat on campus in those days. Nowadays, I would say it's the Grand Terraza over at the Student Life Center. It's a beautiful space with a view of Tecolote Canyon. And whoever is the chef over there, they turn out some very nice dishes. The presentations are great, and the food is very nice, and the quality is there. And you can have a glass of wine there, which is something we didn't have on campus back when I was going to school here. So that would have to be my favorite place to eat here on campus at USD today.